ECOWAS offered assistance to Burkina Faso following the insurgent attack. But could it be that ECOWAS isn't providing its help, instead outsourcing the aid? Is ECOWAS acting on behalf of someone else? When the attack occurred, many experts suggested it was an attempt to render Burkina Faso helpless, so that it would be compelled to seek help from the West. However, Burkina Faso did not do so. Now, ECOWAS is stepping in to offer help. This raises the question, is this a genuine offer, or is it part of a larger plan orchestrated by an external entity? Could this assistance be connected to other sources? Let's find out. Once again, ECOWAS, the economic community of West African states, finds itself at the center of a geopolitical storm.
Voilà, donc
The organization recently issued a statement condemning a brutal attack in Burkina Faso, expressing solidarity with the victims and pledging to activate a counterinsurgent force. At first glance, this seems like a straightforward expression of regional unity against a common enemy. But, as with most geopolitical moves, there's more to the story than meets the eye.
Well, Nicole, actually, it doesn't. The tensions between these three countries and ECOWAS in the last years and months have been really fraught, particularly that for Niger, following that coup that happened almost 6 months now in July 2023. So maybe many might say it's only time that these three countries just pull out as Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Now, don't forget, these three countries already formed what many call their own mini bloc after more like a Sahel alliance for them announced that late last year. And this came on the heels of the tensions between ECOWAS and Niger. Mali, we know, is supposed to be in the transition now, some sort of calendar with ECOWAS, but that has not come to any fruition. And
we have always seen ECOWAS suggesting solutions that the West likes, and this time it's the same.
That's not all. They have also threatened use of force if Niger's ousted president, Mohamed Bazoum, is not reinstated. This came as leaders from West Africa held an emergency meeting on the coup.
The statement from ECOWAS condemning the attack in Basalo, Burkina Faso, has been widely circulated, with phrases like barbaric attacks and solidarity with Burkina Faso dominating the headlines. ECOWAS also emphasized its commitment to a regional counterinsurgency strategy, calling for increased cooperation among member states. While the statement projects an image of unity and resolve, a closer examination reveals deeper, more complex dynamics at play. Dynamics that involve Western influence, strategic interests, and the ongoing struggle for African sovereignty. To truly understand the implications of ECOWAS's statements, we must first break down the language and intent behind their words. When ECOWAS condemns insurgency in Burkina Faso, what hidden messages are embedded within their words, and what significant elements are being left unsaid? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The recent statement from ECOWAS regarding the insurgent attack in Basalo, Burkina Faso, uses strong and emotionally charged language. Terms like barbaric attacks, solidarity with Burkina Faso, and activation of a counterinsurgent force. These phrases, while seemingly straightforward, are carefully selected to project an image of decisive action and regional unity. But a closer examination suggests there might be more to this narrative than just solidarity. Firstly, the use of the word solidarity is key. On the surface, it suggests a commitment to stand with Burkina Faso against insurgents. However, solidarity in diplomatic language often serves as a signal to external powers that the region is attempting to handle its affairs. It is a statement of intent as much as a request for acknowledgement from the global community, particularly Western nations. Yet, this solidarity is frequently influenced by external pressures and expectations, especially from Western powers that have historically played significant roles in African geopolitics. Furthermore, the emphasis on the activation of a counterinsurgent force raises critical questions. Why is ECOWAS pushing this agenda now? And more importantly, whose interests does this serve? The call for a counterinsurgent force suggests a militarized response, which aligns closely with Western models of dealing with insurgents. It also hints at a deeper alignment with Western military strategies, which have often prioritized military solutions over diplomatic or socio-economic ones. ECOWAS's focus on intelligence sharing and border security could be interpreted as an attempt to build a narrative that justifies further militarization of the region. This is particularly concerning given the West's vested interests in maintaining military footholds across Africa. These footholds are often justified under the guise of security cooperation, but frequently serve as strategic points of influence for Western powers, enabling them to exert pressure on African nations while simultaneously securing access to valuable resources. Additionally, by aligning its rhetoric with that of Western nations, ECOWAS may inadvertently, or deliberately, be positioning itself as a proxy for Western interests in Africa. This is not a new phenomenon. Throughout history, Western powers have sought to influence African political and security landscapes, often through local or regional intermediaries. By promoting a counterinsurgent strategy that mirrors Western interests, ECOWAS risks being seen not as an independent African organization, but as an instrument of foreign policy objectives. With these considerations in mind, it becomes essential to scrutinize the effectiveness of the strategies that ECOWAS and, by extension, the West, are promoting. Are these approaches genuinely beneficial for Africa, or are they designed to serve other, less visible agendas? The involvement of Western countries in Africa's security affairs is not a new phenomenon. For decades, Western powers have positioned themselves as critical allies in Africa's fight against insurgents. They have provided military training, arms, and intelligence, often pushing their counterinsurgent strategies as the only viable solution. However, the effectiveness of these strategies is increasingly being called into question. Consider the cases of Libya and Mali. In Libya, Western intervention, ostensibly aimed at deposing a dictator and bringing stability, instead resulted in a power vacuum that has plunged the country into chaos, becoming a breeding ground for extremist groups. In Mali, despite substantial Western military aid and training, the insurgency continues to escalate, with extremist groups growing stronger and expanding their reach into neighboring countries. Even in Nigeria, which has been a major recipient of Western military support, the fight against Boko Haram and other insurgent groups has seen limited success. Despite billions of dollars in military aid, the Nigerian government has struggled to contain these groups, leading to a prolonged conflict that has displaced millions and caused untold suffering. The underlying problem with Western strategies is their reliance on a militaristic approach that fails to address the socio-economic roots of insurgencies. Poverty, unemployment, and lack of education are significant drivers of radicalization in Africa. When young people have no prospects for a better future, extremist groups can easily exploit their frustrations, offering not just money, but a sense of purpose and belonging. By focusing almost exclusively on military solutions, Western strategies often exacerbate these underlying issues. Military interventions disrupt local economies, displace communities, and create conditions that are ripe for radicalization. Moreover, the presence of foreign troops can inflame nationalist and anti-Western sentiments, making it easier for extremist groups to recruit and radicalize. Western involvement is also motivated by self-interest. Military aid and arms sales are big business, and Africa represents a lucrative market for Western defense contractors. Additionally, maintaining a military presence in Africa provides strategic advantages, such as access to valuable resources like oil, minerals, and precious metals. This has less to do with helping Africa and more to do with ensuring that Western nations retain control over these critical resources. Given these dynamics, it is clear that Western strategies are not necessarily aligned with the best interests of Africa. This raises a critical question. What would a truly African-centric approach to counterinsurgency look like, and is it feasible in the current geopolitical climate? Developing an African-centric counterinsurgency strategy requires a fundamental shift in approach, one that moves away from the heavy reliance on militarized solutions and focuses instead on addressing the root causes of extremism. This would involve a comprehensive strategy that integrates military, socio-economic, cultural, and diplomatic efforts. Firstly, any effective counterinsurgency strategy in Africa must prioritize community engagement and local knowledge. Unlike Western strategies that often rely on top-down military solutions, an African-centric approach would focus on building trust and cooperation with local communities. These communities are often the first line of defense against radicalization and can play a critical role in identifying and addressing the grievances that lead to extremism. Traditional conflict resolution methods, long practiced in many African societies, should be leveraged to resolve disputes before they escalate into violence. These methods, which emphasize dialogue, reconciliation, and the restoration of social harmony, could be particularly effective in preventing the spread of extremist ideologies. By involving local leaders, elders, and community members in these processes, African nations can foster a sense of ownership and responsibility for maintaining peace and security. Additionally, an African-centric strategy would place a strong emphasis on socio-economic development. This means investing in education, healthcare, and infrastructure to create jobs and improve living standards. By addressing the socio-economic factors that contribute to radicalization, African nations can reduce the appeal of extremist groups and build more resilient communities. Economic development should also include targeted efforts to empower marginalized groups, such as women and youth, who are often most vulnerable to extremist recruitment. Providing opportunities for education and employment, as well as promoting social inclusion and political participation, can help prevent radicalization and build more inclusive societies. Moreover, Africa needs to develop its own intelligence networks and security frameworks that do not rely on Western oversight. This would involve training local security forces in modern intelligence gathering techniques while respecting local customs and laws. By building self-reliant security institutions, African nations can enhance their ability to respond to threats in a manner that is both effective and culturally appropriate. Diplomatic efforts should also play a central role in an African-centric strategy. African nations must work together to build regional alliances and partnerships that prioritize collective security and shared prosperity. This includes strengthening regional organizations, and that's where ECOWAS suggests itself. Many experts are saying that the insurgencies are caused by external powers, and now these powers are trying to interfere by saying that they want to help. But to understand who is the culprit, we must ask, who truly benefits from the ongoing instability in Africa, and what would happen if African nations chart their course? The narrative that Africa needs Western intervention to combat insurgents is a convenient one for many outside actors, particularly Western powers who have a vested interest in maintaining a presence on the continent. The justification for this presence often revolves around security concerns, but the reality is that instability in Africa serves several purposes for these external powers. For Western nations, a destabilized Africa provides a convenient pretext for military bases and operations. These bases offer strategic military advantages and serve as gateways to Africa's vast natural resources. The presence of Western forces can be seen as both a protective measure and a means of exerting political influence over African governments. In this context, the rhetoric of fighting insurgents often masks a deeper agenda: maintaining control over valuable resources and ensuring that African nations remain dependent on Western security frameworks. Western defense contractors and private military companies also have a significant stake in the continuation of conflict in Africa. The arms trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and African conflicts provide a steady stream of customers. Similarly, private military companies often benefit from contracts to train local forces or provide security services, further entrenching Western influence on the continent. However, the true cost of this arrangement is borne by African nations themselves. Prolonged conflicts lead to loss of life, economic stagnation, and political instability. If African nations were to adopt a more self-reliant approach to security, focusing on regional cooperation and indigenous solutions, it could fundamentally alter the power dynamics between Africa and the West. A self-sufficient Africa would be less susceptible to external manipulation and more capable of setting its agenda, both politically and economically. The implications of such a shift would be profound. It would challenge the prevailing narratives that have long justified Western involvement in Africa and force a re-evaluation of the continent's role in global geopolitics. A more self-reliant Africa could potentially reduce its dependence on foreign aid, negotiate more favorable trade agreements, and play a more assertive role in international affairs. However, this shift would not come without resistance. Western powers have a long history of intervening in African affairs to protect their interests, often under the guise of promoting stability or protecting human rights. They are unlikely to relinquish their influence easily and may employ various tactics, including economic pressure, diplomatic plots, or even military intervention to maintain their foothold on the continent. Understanding the vested interests of Western powers in Africa's security landscape makes it clear why they might resist a shift toward African self-reliance. But what would this shift look like in practical terms, and is Africa prepared to undertake such a transformation? For Africa to secure its future, a radical transformation in its approach to security and governance is required. This transformation must begin with building strong, transparent institutions that prioritize the interests of African citizens over those of foreign powers. Addressing issues such as corruption, lack of accountability, and weak governance structures is critical. By strengthening their institutions, African nations can make more autonomous decisions about their security and development. Regional cooperation is another vital component. This involves fostering genuine economic and political integration, as well as developing a cohesive regional security strategy that addresses the unique challenges faced by African countries. By working together on infrastructure projects, trade agreements, and regional development initiatives, African nations can create a more stable and prosperous environment that naturally counteracts the spread of extremism. A Pan-African defense strategy, free from Western oversight, could also play a pivotal role. This would involve developing homegrown military capabilities, including the training of troops, the production of military equipment, and the establishment of an African intelligence network. Such a strategy would emphasize preventive measures, such as conflict resolution and socio-economic development, over purely military responses. It would also prioritize African-led peacekeeping missions and humanitarian interventions, reducing the continent's reliance on Western forces. Diplomatically, African nations must engage with Western powers on more equal terms. While partnerships with the West can be beneficial, they must be pursued with a clear understanding of African priorities. Africa needs to assert its agency in these relationships, refusing to be the passive recipient of aid or the battleground for proxy wars. This requires a unified diplomatic front, where African nations speak with one voice on matters of security and development. Finally, there is a need for a cultural shift within Africa itself. African nations must foster a sense of unity and solidarity that transcends national borders and ethnic divisions. By promoting a Pan-African identity and a shared vision for the continent's future, Africa can build a more cohesive and resilient society that is less susceptible to external manipulation. The path to a more secure and self-reliant Africa is fraught with challenges. The West will not easily relinquish its influence, and there will be obstacles both from within and outside the continent. However, with determination, unity, and a clear vision, Africa can overcome these challenges and emerge stronger and more independent. The fight against insurgency in Africa is about more than just security. It is about sovereignty, self-determination, and the right to control one's future. The current approach, heavily influenced by Western interests, has failed to provide lasting peace and stability. Instead, it has often exacerbated the very problems it sought to solve. For Africa to truly address its security challenges, it must develop strategies that are rooted in its realities and free from external control. The journey toward a secure and self-reliant Africa is not easy, but it is necessary. African nations must break free from the shadows of Western influence and take control of their destiny. This requires a commitment to unity, transparency, and a relentless pursuit of self-reliance. The West may have its plans, but Africa's future belongs to Africans. It's time for the continent to stand strong, united, and unapologetically in pursuit of its destiny. With courage, clarity, and a collective will, Africa can rise to meet its challenges and emerge stronger, more resilient, and truly independent. But as ECOWAS has offered its help, should Burkina Faso accept it? Is it coming from some external sources? Let us know in the comment section. Was it all part of the plan? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.